The steel-grey sky above the sprawling city of Galvanta buzzed with activity as alien vessels darted between hovering skyscrapers. The faint tang of ozone from the repulsor lift engines mingled with the acrid scent of industrial exhaust, while the air vibrated with a low, steady hum that resonated like a heartbeat through the city. The air shimmered with the faint hum of repulsor lift engines, a sound that resonated deep in Zara's chest. Below, a diverse crowd of beings moved through the bustling streets, their voices creating a chaotic symphony of languages. Galvanta was a melting pot of interstellar cultures, where trade deals were brokered, alliances forged, and disputes settled all under the watchful eye of the Universal Assembly. Yet, amidst the apparent civility, tension simmered. Humans, or Deathworlders, as they were often called in whispers, were known for their stubbornness and adaptability, but few truly understood the depth of their history. Most of the galaxy thought humans had tamed themselves, learning to play by the rules of galactic diplomacy. They couldn't have been more wrong. Captain Zara Vayne stood at the edge of the crowded promenade, sipping a steaming cup of coffee from a sturdy mug emblazoned with a faded Earth emblem. Her sharp eyes scanned the crowd, cataloguing everything with a practiced ease. Her military uniform, worn but impeccably maintained, bore the insignia of the Terran Confederation. Beside her, Sergeant Lin Quan leaned casually against a railing, his demeanor deceptively relaxed as he munched on a protein bar. His sharp features betrayed an ever-present readiness, a coiled spring waiting for the right moment to act. "Still think this is a waste of time?" Zara asked, her voice calm but laced with a hint of amusement. Quan shrugged, brushing crumbs off his uniform with a practiced flick before smirking. "Funny how we always end up cleaning up after someone else's mess, huh? Depends. Are we here to make a point, or are we here to babysit diplomats who wouldn't know a real threat if it bit them?" Before Zara could respond, a ripple passed through the crowd. The faint murmur of conversation faltered, replaced by a heavy silence. Zara followed the collective gaze to the plaza's center, where a towering, insectoid alien stood atop a raised platform. Its chitinous body glinted in the artificial light, and its multiple eyes scanned the gathered beings with disdain. This was Ambassador Grithak of the Zalthar Dominion, a species known for their arrogance and disdain for lesser life forms. Grithak raised one of its spindly arms, its claws glinting ominously under the bright lights, commanding attention. "Inhabitants of Galvanta," it began, its voice a grating rasp that echoed through the plaza. "The Universal Assembly exists to maintain order, yet we find ourselves plagued by chaos. The so-called Terran Confederation claims to be our equal, yet their actions speak otherwise. Their kind, primitive, reckless, violent, have no place in our civilized society." Zara exhaled slowly, her fingers drumming against the mug's ceramic surface, each tap a measured effort to contain the simmering frustration beneath her calm exterior. Beside her, Quan let out a low whistle. "Well, that's one way to kick off a diplomatic event." The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some species nodded in agreement, while others shifted uncomfortably. Humans were known to be unpredictable, and though their technological advancements rivaled those of older civilizations, their reputation as Deathworlders cast a long shadow. Grithak continued, oblivious to the rising tension. "We propose a resolution to limit the influence of such barbaric species within the Assembly. Their aggressive tendencies endanger us all. How many more incidents must we endure before action is taken?" A murmur of agreement rippled through a portion of the crowd, but it was drowned out by a sharp, mocking laugh. Zara turned toward the sound, her eyes narrowing as she spotted the source. A young human, clad in civilian attire, had stepped forward, his expression a mixture of amusement and defiance. "Barbaric," he called out, his voice carrying across the plaza. "You talk about aggression like it's something unique to humans. Last I checked, the Zalthar were the ones who glassed an entire colony over a trade dispute." Grithak's mandibles clicked sharply, the sound reminiscent of jagged glass grinding together, a grating noise that sent an involuntary shiver through the nearest spectators. "You dare question the actions of a superior species?" The young man spread his arms in mock surrender. "Hey, I'm just pointing out the hypocrisy. You call us uncivilized, but when push comes to shove, everyone's got skeletons in their closet." Before the exchange could escalate further, Zara stepped forward, her presence commanding instant attention. Ambassador Grithak, she said, her tone cool and measured, if you have specific grievances with the Terran Confederation, perhaps you should address them through proper channels instead of grandstanding in public. Grithak's multifaceted eyes fixed on Zara, its disdain palpable. And who are you to speak for your kind, Terran? Zara's lips curved into a faint smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. Captain Zara Vayne, Terran Confederation. And I'm here to remind you that respect is a two-way street. The tension in the plaza was electric. The crowd's attention shifted between Zara and Grithak, anticipation hanging heavy in the air. For a moment, it seemed as though the situation might spiral out of control. But then, Grithak let out a derisive hiss and turned away, its arrogance refusing to entertain further debate. Quan sidled up to Zara, his voice low. Think that'll hold him off? Not a chance, Zara replied. But it buys us time. Later that evening, Zara and Quan sat in a dimly lit briefing room aboard the Resolute Dawn, their vessel stationed in orbit above Galvanta. A holographic display projected a detailed map of the city, highlighting key locations and potential flashpoints. Around the table, a small team of Terran operatives reviewed the data, their expressions grim. Intel suggests the Zalthar are planning something big, said Lieutenant Jonas Meyers, the team's intelligence officer. We've. Zara nodded, her mind racing. The stakes had just been raised, and there was no turning back now. Intercepted chatter about a coordinated operation aimed at discrediting the Confederation. Details? Zara asked, her voice sharp. Meyers shook his head. Still piecing it together. But whatever it is, they're pulling in resources from multiple sectors. They're serious about this. Quan leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. If they're going through all this trouble, they're not just looking to embarrass us. They want to provoke us. Zara nodded. Which means we need to stay one step ahead. Meyers, keep digging. The rest of you, double-check our contingency plans. If the Zalthar want to play games, we'll be ready. The team dispersed, leaving Zara alone with Quan. She stared at the holographic map, her mind racing through potential scenarios. Quan studied her for a moment before speaking. You know they're underestimating us, right? He said. Zara's gaze didn't waver. That's their mistake. By the time the next day dawned, Zara's unease had grown into a persistent tension, a nagging sense that something was about to happen. The Zalthar delegation hosted a formal reception in one of Galvanta's grand halls, a spectacle designed to impress or perhaps intimidate. The event was a spectacle of opulence, with elaborate decorations and an array of exotic delicacies. Representatives from dozens of species mingled, their conversations a murmur of overlapping languages. Zara and Quan entered the hall, their presence immediately drawing attention. Zara's uniform seemed almost out of place amidst the formal attire of the other guests, but she wore it with unwavering confidence. Quan, for his part, moved with the ease of someone who could blend into any environment. As they navigated the room, Zara's sharp eyes caught subtle signs of unease. Conversations faltered as she passed, and more than a few glances were cast their way. The atmosphere was charged, the air heavy with unspoken tension. Something's off, Quan murmured, his voice barely audible over the din. Zara nodded. Stay sharp. They approached a group of delegates, exchanging polite greetings and engaging in surface-level conversation. But Zara's attention was elsewhere, her instincts screaming that danger was near. She scanned the room, her gaze falling on a cluster of Zalthar officials who seemed particularly animated. The lights dimmed in a slow, deliberate wave, casting the room in shadow as if the atmosphere itself was holding its breath. Conversations faltered, replaced by a weighty, expectant silence. All eyes turned to the stage, where Ambassador Grithak stood once again. Its mandibles clicked in what might have been interpreted as a smile, though to Zara it felt more like a predator baring its fangs. Honored guests, Grithak began, its voice dripping with false warmth. We are gathered here to celebrate unity and progress. Yet, unity cannot exist without trust. And trust cannot exist in the shadow of fear. Zara's pulse quickened. She didn't trust Grithak's theatrics for a second. Her hand drifted toward the concealed weapon at her side, her movements subtle but deliberate. Grithak's tone shifted, becoming sharper. Tonight, we reveal the true nature of the Terran Confederation. Let their actions speak for themselves. As if on cue, a series of holographic images filled the air above the stage. They depicted scenes of destruction, burning cities, shattered landscapes, and bodies strewn across battlefields. The captions labeled each image as the result of human aggression, painting a grim portrait of humanity's past. The crowd erupted into murmurs, shock and disbelief rippling through the room. Zara's jaw tightened. The images were real, but they were taken out of context, stripped of the circumstances that had led to those moments. Quan leaned closer, his voice low. "They're trying to turn everyone against us." "Let them try," Zara replied, her voice steely. "We've faced worse." Grithak's gaze swept the room, its multifaceted eyes gleaming as it straightened to its full height, mandibles twitching in a way that almost resembled a smirk. The deliberate pause, the slow tilt of its head, radiated a confidence that bordered on condescension, as though savoring a victory no one else yet understood. "This is the legacy of Deathworlders. They bring chaos, destruction, and death wherever they go. Is this the future we want for our galaxy?" Before anyone could respond, Zara stepped forward, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "You talk about legacy, Ambassador. Let's talk about yours." All eyes turned to her, the room falling into a tense silence. Zara's expression was calm, but her eyes burned with intensity. "The Zalthar Dominion has its own history of conquest and brutality. Shall we compare notes, or would you prefer to keep this charade going?" Grithak's mandibles clicked in irritation, but before it could respond, a loud alarm blared, shattering the uneasy calm. The lights flickered, and the room plunged into chaos as security forces rushed in, weapons drawn. Quan was already moving, his instincts kicking in. "This is it," he said, drawing his weapon. "They're making their move." The plaza was a flurry of chaos as Zara and Quan moved with practiced precision, weaving through the panicked crowd. The alarm blared relentlessly, slicing through the air and amplifying the chaos as its shrill tone echoed off the ornate walls. Zara's mind raced, analyzing every detail of the unfolding situation. The Zalthar had made their move, but she knew they wouldn't rely on theatrics alone. This was the prelude to something much bigger. "Mayor's report," Zara barked into her communicator, her voice steady despite the turmoil around her. A moment of static crackled before Lieutenant Mayer's voice cut through. "Captain, we've intercepted a data burst from the Zalthar delegation's quarters. They've activated a covert strike team. Coordinates suggest they're targeting the primary power relay for the city." "Understood," Zara replied, already calculating the implications. The primary relay controlled not just Galvanta's energy grid but also its defensive systems. If the Zalthar sabotaged it, the city would be left vulnerable to further attacks and the blame would inevitably fall on the humans. Quan's eyes met hers, his expression grim. "If they take out the relay, we're not just looking at blackouts. It'll be open season for anyone with a grudge against the Confederation." "Then we stop them," Zara said firmly. "Mayors, patch the coordinates to our HUDs. Quan, you're with me. We'll need a small team to secure the relay and neutralize any hostiles." As the data appeared on her heads-up display, Zara's gaze flicked over the layout. The relay station was located in the industrial sector, a sprawling complex of interconnected facilities and subterranean tunnels. The terrain was perfect for ambushes, and Zara knew the Zalthar wouldn't make this easy. The industrial sector was a stark contrast to the Grand Hall's opulence, with dim lighting casting long shadows across machinery, the acrid air heavy with the stench of burning fuel and metallic particulates clinging to every breath. Towering smokestacks belched plumes of noxious gases into the air, casting long shadows over the labyrinth of pipes and catwalks below. The faint hum of machinery filled the air, punctuated by the occasional hiss of steam vents. Zara and her team moved with deliberate speed, their boots crunching against the gritty surface as they navigated the maze of metal and concrete. "Eyes up," Quan murmured, his weapon held at the ready. "This place is a sniper's paradise." Zara nodded, her own weapon drawn. The team fanned out, each member scanning their sector with disciplined precision. The relay station loomed ahead, a massive structure bristling with conduits and antennae. Its main entrance was flanked by heavy blast doors, currently sealed shut. Mayors, status on the relay's security systems? Zara asked over the comms. They're still operational for now, but I'm seeing unauthorized access attempts. The Zalthar team is already inside. Zara's jaw tightened. We'll breach from the east side. Quan, take point. The team moved swiftly, circling around the perimeter. Their progress was slowed by the uneven terrain and sudden bursts of hissing steam, forcing the team to tread cautiously as tension mounted, until they finally reached a service hatch partially concealed by a tangle of pipes. Quan knelt by the hatch, his deft fingers working to override the access panel. Moments later, the lock disengaged with a soft click. "We're in," Quan said, pushing the hatch open and peering inside. The corridor beyond was dimly lit, the walls lined with cables and conduits that thrummed with energy. "Stay sharp," Zara instructed, leading the team into the confined space. The air inside was stifling, a mix of searing heat, the metallic tang of machinery, and the faint, acrid odor of old lubricants hanging in the confined space. Their footsteps echoed softly as they advanced, their movements synchronized and silent. They hadn't gone far when a sharp crack split the air. The team instinctively dropped into cover as a burst of plasma fire scorched the wall behind them. Zara's eyes darted to the source, spotting a trio of Zalthar operatives crouched behind a makeshift barricade further down the corridor. "Contact. 3 hostiles at 2 o'clock, Quan called out, already returning fire. "Suppressing fire," Zara ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. The corridor lit up with the strobe of muzzle flashes as the team engaged the enemy. Zara's shots were precise, forcing one of the Zalthar to retreat further down the corridor. "They're falling back," Quan observed, his tone wary. "Probably leading us into a trap." "We don't have time to play it safe," Zara said, her mind racing. "Quan, take Harris and flank them from the left. I'll hold their attention." Quan nodded, signaling to one of the team members. The two moved with practiced efficiency, disappearing into a side passage. Zara and the remaining operatives pressed forward, their weapons trained on the retreating Zalthar. The trap sprang to life with a mechanical whir, the hidden turret emerging from a recess in the wall, its twin barrels locking onto the team with deadly precision. As Zara's team advanced, a hidden turret whirred to life, its twin barrels swiveling toward them with deadly intent. Zara reacted instantly, diving behind a support pillar as the turret unleashed a hail of plasma bolts. Her team scrambled for cover, the air thick with the acrid smell of burnt metal. "Mayors, we've got automated defenses," Zara reported, her voice clipped. "Can you disable them remotely?" "Working on it," Mayors replied, the sound of frantic typing audible in the background. "Give me 30 seconds. "We don't have 30 seconds, Zara muttered, her gaze flicking to the turret. Its rate of fire was relentless, pinning them down with surgical precision. She glanced at one of her operatives, a demolitions specialist named Ortega. "Ortega, can you disable that thing?" Ortega nodded, pulling a compact charge from his pack. "Cover me." Zara provided suppressing fire as Ortega sprinted toward the turret, his movements swift and deliberate. He ducked under the barrage of plasma, planting the charge at the turret's base before retreating. Seconds later, the device detonated with a deafening boom, reducing the turret to a smoking heap of scrap. "Turret neutralized," Ortega reported, his tone triumphant. "Good work," Zara said, motioning for the team to move forward. They pressed on, the corridor opening into a larger chamber dominated by the relay's control console. The room was bathed in the flickering glow of emergency lighting, casting long shadows across the walls. The Zalthar operatives were waiting for them. A dozen figures stood between Zara's team and the console, their weapons raised and their postures tense. At their center stood a Zalthar commander, its chitinous armor gleaming and its mandibles clicking in anticipation. "Surrender," the commander hissed, its voice cold and mechanical. "You cannot win here." Zara stepped forward, her weapon trained on the commander. "We're not here to win. We're here to stop you." The room erupted into chaos as both sides opened fire. Zara's team moved with precision, each member covering their sector and targeting the enemy with ruthless efficiency. Zara's shots found their mark, taking down 2 operatives before they could reposition. Quan's flanking maneuver proved invaluable, catching the Zalthar off guard and forcing them into disarray. The fight was chaotic and relentless. The acrid tang of scorched metal hung in the air, mingling with the shrill whine of plasma bolts. Sharp cries of combatants echoed through the chamber, amplifying the sense of desperation. Zara's focus was razor-sharp, her movements a seamless blend of instinct and training. As the last Zalthar operative fell, the room fell silent, save for the hum of the relay. "Clear," Quan reported, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. Zara approached the console, her gaze sweeping over the controls. The Zalthar had initiated a countdown sequence. The relay's control panel flashed erratic red warnings as a rhythmic klaxon blared, its urgent tone a relentless reminder of the impending overload. Zara's fingers flew across the interface, bypassing security protocols and isolating the corrupted systems. "Captain, we've got company," Quan warned, his eyes on the corridor they'd entered from. More Zalthar reinforcements were on the way. "Hold them off," Zara ordered, her focus unwavering. "I'll stabilize the relay." Quan and the team formed a defensive perimeter, their weapons trained on the approaching hostiles. Zara's hands moved with practiced precision, her mind racing to counter the Zalthar's sabotage. Alarms blared as the countdown ticked down, each second bringing them closer to disaster. With a final keystroke, Zara executed the override, halting the cascade and restoring stability to the relay. The hum of the machinery shifted, a steady rhythm replacing the chaotic fluctuations from moments before. "Relay secured," Zara announced, stepping back from the console. "Fall back to extraction." The team moved swiftly, fighting off the remaining Zalthar as they made their escape. By the time they reached the surface, reinforcements from the Terran Confederation had arrived, securing the area and driving off the remaining hostiles. As Zara and Quan regrouped with their team, the gravity of their success began to sink in. They had prevented a catastrophe, but the stakes were higher than ever. The Zalthar's actions were a declaration of war, and Zara knew the fight was far from over. The hum of the Resolute Dawn's engines reverberated through the dimly lit briefing room, where the scent of machine oil hung in the air and the cool vibration of the ship pulsed through the walls. The map of Galvanta's industrial sector glowed faintly, the red markers denoting enemy activity stark against the backdrop of intersecting tunnels and facilities. Zara's team stood behind her, their postures tense but ready. The Zalthar had made their intentions clear, and the stakes had never been higher. "They're regrouping," Quan said, pointing to the shifting red markers. "Looks like they're consolidating their forces near the Eastern Power Conduit. That's got to be their next target." Zara nodded, her mind racing. The Eastern Conduit wasn't just critical to the power grid, it also housed Galvanta's emergency shielding systems. If the Zalthar disabled it, the city would be left completely vulnerable to orbital strikes. "We can't let them get that far," Zara said. "Mayers, what's the status of reinforcements?" Lieutenant Mayer's voice crackled over the comms. "Still en route, Captain. ETA 10 minutes. Zara grimaced, her jaw tightening as a surge of frustration bubbled beneath her calm exterior. 10 minutes felt like an eternity they couldn't afford, with the threat of catastrophic failure looming over every second. "We'll have to hold them off ourselves. Quan, Ortega, Harris, you're with me. The rest of you, stay here and coordinate with the reinforcements when they arrive." The team moved quickly, their boots thudding against the metal floors as they exited the briefing room. Zara's thoughts were focused, her every step calculated. The Zalthar had shown their willingness to escalate, and she knew this confrontation would be their most desperate yet. The Eastern Conduit loomed ahead, its towering machinery humming with latent energy. The faint pulse of the conduits, like lifeblood coursing through veins, carried an ominous promise of what was at stake. The air was thick with the hum of energy, the faint crackle of electrical discharge adding an edge of danger to the atmosphere. Zara and her team moved cautiously, their weapons drawn as they scanned the area for threats. "Movement up ahead," Quan murmured, his voice barely audible over the ambient noise. He gestured toward a cluster of crates near the central control console. Zara signaled for the team to fan out, each member taking up a strategic position. She raised her weapon, her sights trained on the crates. For a moment, there was only silence, the tension coiling like a spring. Then the attack came. Zalthar operatives emerged from their cover, their weapons blazing with bursts of plasma. The air erupted into chaos as Zara and her team returned fire, their training kicking in as they moved with precision. Zara's shots found their marks, forcing several enemies to retreat, but the Zalthar were relentless, their numbers greater than anticipated. "They are trying to flank us," Ortega shouted, his voice cutting through the din. Zara turned to see a group of Zalthar circling around to their left, their movements coordinated and deliberate. "Harris, cover the flank," she ordered. "Ortega, lay down suppressing fire." The team adjusted their positions, their movements seamless despite the chaos. Harris fired a barrage of shots, forcing the flanking Zalthar to take cover, while Ortega's suppressing fire kept the main force pinned down. Zara took advantage of the brief lull, her mind racing for a solution. "Meyers, we need a status update on those reinforcements," she said over the comms. 3 minutes out, Meyers replied. "Hold tight, Captain. We don't have a choice," Zara muttered. She scanned the area, her eyes landing on a series of energy relays running along the far wall. An idea began to form. "Quan, see those relays? If we can overload them, we might be able to create a barrier to buy us some time." Quan followed her gaze, a grin spreading across his face. "On it." As Quan moved toward the relays, Zara provided cover, her shots precise and calculated. The Zalthar pressed their attack with relentless force, forcing Zara's team to brace against the onslaught. Despite the chaos, their resolve held firm. Every movement, honed by rigorous training and unspoken camaraderie, reflected their determination to hold the line. Quan reached the relays and began working quickly, his fingers flying over the control panel. Sparks flew as he bypassed the safety protocols, the hum of the relays growing louder with each passing second. "Almost there," Quan called out, his voice strained. "Hurry," Zara urged, her eyes never leaving the battlefield. The relays erupted in a cascade of blinding sparks, the surge of energy rippling through the air with a deafening crackle. Heat radiated outward as the barrier forced the Zalthar to retreat. Their formation crumbled, scattering into disorganized pockets as panic overtook them. The team regrouped, their breaths coming in ragged gasps as they took stock of the situation. "Reinforcements are here," Meyers announced over the comms. Zara allowed herself a moment of relief as the sound of approaching ships filled the air. The Terran Confederation's forces descended upon the conduit, their presence turning the tide of the battle. The Zalthar, realizing they were outmatched, began to retreat, their forces scattering into the shadows. The aftermath of the battle was marked by heavy breaths and silent exchanges, exhaustion etched into every movement. Beneath the weariness, grim determination manifested in tight-set jaws and resolute gazes, each action driven by the weight of their duty. Zara stood amidst the wreckage, her gaze sweeping over the damaged machinery and the fallen bodies of friend and foe alike. The eastern conduit had been secured, but the cost had been high. "What's the damage?" she asked, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. Quan approached, his expression somber. "The conduit's stable, but it'll take days to repair the damage. We lost 3 of our own." Zara nodded, her jaw tightening. "We'll honor them. They knew the risks, and they gave everything to protect this city." She turned her attention to the horizon, where the Zalthar's ships were retreating beyond the atmosphere. This wasn't over. The Zalthar had made their move, but Zara knew they wouldn't stop here. The battle for Galvanta was just the beginning. "Meyers, start analyzing their retreat patterns," she said. "I want to know where they're going and what they're planning next." "Yes, Captain," Meyers replied, already diving into his console. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the city in fiery hues of orange and red, Zara stood motionless, her thoughts a storm of strategy and resolve. The weight of the coming fight bore down on her like the first gusts of a gathering tempest, a reminder of the personal stakes she carried into every battle. The Zalthar thought they could exploit humanity's perceived weakness, but they'd underestimated the resilience and determination of Deathworlders. And that was a mistake Zara intended to make them regret. The sky above Galvanta shifted between muted grays and streaks of crimson, the morning sun casting faint rays over the battered city as if promising a fragile but determined renewal. Zara stood at the observation deck of the Resolute Dawn, her hands clasped behind her back as she stared out over the city. Below, the clatter of tools and faint hum of machinery echoed, mingling with the occasional laughter of a child helping their parent, a vivid testament to the resilience and humanity of the city's people. Despite the cost, the city stood, a beacon of defiance against the Zalthar's ambitions. "Captain," Quan's voice broke through her thoughts. He stepped onto the deck, his uniform stained with soot but his posture as steady as ever. "Mayers has finished analyzing the Zalthar's retreat patterns. It looks like they're regrouping at a base near the asteroid belt in Sector 7. Zara nodded, her eyes still on the horizon. "Good. Notify command. We'll need a coordinated strike to ensure they don't try something like this again." Quan's hand lingered on the doorframe, his brow furrowing deeply, as if weighing the gravity of the situation before finally speaking, his voice tinged with uncharacteristic uncertainty. "We're not going to get a moment's rest, are we?" Zara turned to him, a faint smile touching her lips. "Rest isn't what we signed up for. But if we do our job right, maybe the next generation won't have to fight these battles." Quan nodded, his expression softening. "It's not just about winning, is it? It's about what comes after." "Exactly," Zara said. "If we're going to fight, it has to mean something." Later that day, Zara addressed the crew. The gathered team stood in the ship's central hangar, their faces a mix of exhaustion and determination. The scars of the battle lingered in every corner, bandages wrapped tightly around limbs, soot-streaking uniforms, and the faint smell of ash mingling with the soft murmur of tired voices and the shuffle of weary footsteps. But in their eyes was a glint of something stronger than fatigue, hope. "We've proven something important," Zara began, her voice carrying across the hangar. "The Zalthar wanted to test us, to see if we would break. They underestimated what it means to stand together, to fight not just for survival but for something greater." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "Each of you displayed unyielding bravery and resourcefulness. I'll never forget Ortega's charge to disable the turret or the way Harris held the flank under relentless fire. Your actions define what it means to stand together. It's not the technology we wield or the strategies we deploy that make us strong. It's our ability to adapt, to rise together, and to carry the weight of those who can't fight for themselves." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Zara stepped down from the platform, moving among the crew as she spoke. "We are Deathworlders, yes. But that name isn't just about where we come from. It's about what we've endured. It's about taking the pain, the loss, and the chaos and turning it into something unbreakable. We don't just survive. We thrive." The crew erupted into applause, the sound echoing through the hangar like a rallying cry. Zara felt a swell of pride, but she also knew that this was just the beginning. The Zalthar would regroup, and other threats would emerge. But for now, they had won. And that victory mattered. In the days that followed, Zara worked closely with her team to ensure Galvanta's defenses were restored and bolstered. The city's leaders expressed their gratitude, their voices tinged with both relief and newfound respect for the Terran Confederation. Zara's crew, once seen as outsiders, were now hailed as heroes. On the final day of their mission, Zara found herself walking through one of Galvanta's bustling markets. The destruction of the battle seemed a distant memory as vendors hawked their goods and children laughed while chasing each other through the narrow streets. It was a stark reminder of what they were fighting for, the ordinary moments that made life worth living. As she paused to admire a small, intricately carved trinket shaped like a rising phoenix, an older alien vendor, his leathery skin marked with deep lines that seemed to tell a lifetime of stories, looked up at her with piercing yellow eyes filled with quiet gratitude. "You fought for us," he said, his voice gravelly but kind. "And you won. But you didn't just fight for this city. You fought for hope." Zara held his gaze, the weight of his words settling over her. "We fight because it's the right thing to do. Because no one should have to face this alone." The vendor nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Then you're not just warriors. You're protectors." Zara accepted the trinket he handed her, a small carving of a phoenix rising from flames. It was a symbol of resilience, of rebirth. She thanked him and continued on, the small figure clutched tightly in her hand. As the Resolute Dawn lifted off from Galvanta, Zara stood on the bridge, the phoenix carving resting on the console before her. The city grew smaller beneath them, but its spirit lingered in her thoughts. The battles ahead would be difficult, but Zara knew humanity's strength lay in its enduring spirit. Like the phoenix in her hand, they would rise from the ashes, bold and unyielding, to shape a future where resilience paved the way for peace. Because in the end, it wasn't just about surviving as Deathworlders. It was about proving that even in the face of chaos, they could create a future worth fighting for.